And hello everyone, welcome back to another Nim tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll be continuing taking a look at the OS module. So let's get started. Now let's say we have var file, and file is the name of a file, so let's call it secret. Now, what if you wanted to add an extension to this file? Now, one way you can do this is by just appending your extension to the file. However, if you do this, then if that file already had an extension, it will now have two, which is not really great. So we can do file is equal to add file ext. And here we can just pass in the file name and then the extension, so txt if we wanted to. And then we can echo out file. Now when we run this, we'll get the name that it now provided. But if we were to say .txt and we were to run it again, you'll notice we didn't get an extra extension added to this file. And you'll notice if we change it to a different extension, it won't add this new extension. So this way you can always make sure that you don't modify the extension when you shouldn't be. However, it's still completely possible to go here and say echo file.change file extension, and here let's say we want to change it to zip from txt. Now when we run it, then here we get secret.txt and then it changed to secret.zip. So if you want to change one that already has a file extension, this is the way to go. Alright, so let's say here in test.t or just test, we add text.txt. Right? So now this folder has a file in it called text.txt. Now we can say copy dir, and here we can say my dir, or not my dir, we can say test, and copy it to test dir. There we go. Now when we do this, it will copy this directory and its contents, as you can see here. Now take note, when you do this, the permissions may change between these two. So let's say this only has read permissions, but not write and execute permissions. Then this here will have the default permissions provided by your operating system and not whatever the permissions this folder has. So if you don't really know how permissions in Linux work and whatnot, you don't have to worry too much about it. But just know that this will change permissions if this one has permissions that are not the default provided by your system. If you want to also copy with the permissions, then you can say copy dir with permissions. Then it will copy it with those permissions. So let's go also dir. And of course, if you want to see what their permissions are, you can go ls-l. In my case, they all should have the same permissions, as you can see. Read, write, execute, whatnot. So now when we do this, it will copy it as well, but then it will copy it with the permissions provided or given to that one. You can also copy files. So let's say copy file. And here we can say lols.txt. And we can copy it to test. And you can also specify exactly what you want to call it. So here we can say lols.txt. You might want to, instead of doing this, you might want to go like that, just to make sure you get the right thing here, because we're on Windows, this might not work. You might not be allowed to use a /. Anyhow, and here we can say txt. And now if we were to just open up test here, there's no lols.txt, but if we were to do this, it will copy it and make a lols.txt with the same content. Take note, again, permissions will change to the default permissions. If you want to keep the permissions, you can say copy dir with, not copy dir, but copy file with permissions. And now it will do the same thing, but it will copy it with those permissions. To create a directory, you can just say create dir, and here we can say noise dir, so a nice directory. And you can also check echo if that directory exists, so dir exists, and we can say noise dir And yeah, let's check this out. So here it creates noise dir, and yes, it does exist. However, what if it doesn't exist? And if it doesn't exist, you want to create it. In that case, you can say echo exists or create directory. So it will check if it exists. If it doesn't, it will create it. So basically combined those two commands we just covered. So you can say my dir. Now, if we were to run this, it doesn't exist, which it says false, so it doesn't exist. It returns that it did not exist and that we just created it, as you can see there. However, if we were to do this, it will return true because it already exists, so we didn't need to create it. We can simply, to remove a directory, go remove dir. And note, this will delete a folder and everything inside of it. So be careful with this, but we can go my dir, which if we take a look here, has nothing in it. And there's also dir, which we can delete. Also dir. Just to show you, it will also delete whatever inside of it. There we go, both of them are deleted, as simple as that. You can also delete a file. So here we can say remove a file instead, and we can specify test/lols.txt. Now if we were to run this, it removed that file. Then you also have try remove file. Now this one is special because it tries to remove a file. It will return false if it failed, but it will return true if it's a success or if the file does not exist. So here, if I try and do that, it's just going to return true because the file doesn't exist. And why am I getting out? Because I need to echo it. There we go. Now, if I were to run this, you'll notice we get true because it never even existed. But let's say we tried to delete text.txt. So it will also try to remove. So if we say text.txt, it will be able to remove it if needed. There we go. All right. Now let's learn a little bit about file permissions. For example, let's say we go here and say echo get file permissions. And we say for lols.txt. If we were to run this, we get all of these. Now let me explain this. So if P is just like file permissions, and then you have user, you have group, and then you have other. So if I go ls-l and let's say lols.txt, here's what it represents when we take a look at it in the Linux file system. So you'll notice we have user write, user read, so there, read and write, group read, which is this part here, so it has read, and then others read. So this basically says who is allowed to touch and read and modify this file, whatnot. Cool. I'm going to save this into perms. And here let's say excl file permissions. Now you'll notice here it actually gives a little IntelliSense, says it's convenience for set file permissions. Do that and we get the permissions and then we subtract the permissions. So this will remove permissions. And we can specify which ones we want to remove. So here we could say fp group read. Then we can just echo out this right here. And we also need to specify exactly which file. So let's go here and say lols. Actually, let's also go var file. There we go. Then I don't have to type that out the whole time. So say file and boom. Now if we were to run that, then now we don't have group read permissions anymore. If I go like this, you'll notice there's no more read permissions here. So we removed this permission. Then you also have set file permissions. We specify a file, and here we can specify what permissions, such as fp user exec, fp group read, and fp user read, like this. Now take note, this will erase all other file permissions. So when we run this, all other file permissions will be erased, but now we will have these permissions added. So take note, it will erase the existing permissions if you have any. Now let's go here and echo out get file info, and we can just pass in file here. And this will return a ton of the file's info. So let's run this. And here we go. So we get the ID. There's like the file ID, I'm assuming. The kind is a file. The size is 60, I'm assuming that's kilobytes. Here's the permissions we have. The linked count, last accessed, last time it was written to, and when it was created. We can also get file size. And this will get the file size for us. So we go ls-lh and we say lols.txt. You'll notice it is 60. So that's, I'm thinking, 60 kilobytes. Alright, and I think that is enough for this tutorial. We'll be having another tutorial after this one, covering a little bit more on the OS module. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all again in the next Nim tutorial.